Hello, second grade leaders. When we left off with Edward, he was with Nellie and Lawrence, and he had been renamed Susanna. And then the chapter kind of left us on a little bit of a cliffhanger because it had mentioned that their daughter was coming. So we're going to see in chapter 10 what happens when Nellie and Lawrence's daughter shows up. Lolly was a lumpy woman who spoke too loudly and wore too much lipstick. She entered the house immediately, spotted Edward sitting on the living room couch. "What's this?" she said, and put down her suitcase and picked Edward up by one foot. She held him upside down. "That's Susanna," said Nellie. "Susanna!" shouted Lolly. She gave Edward a shake. His dress was up over his head and he could see nothing. Already he'd formed a deep and abiding hatred for Lolly. "Your father found her," said Nellie. "She came up in a net, and she didn't have no clothes on her, so I made her some dresses." "Have you gone skivvy?" shouted Lolly. "Rabbits don't need clothes." "Well," said Nellie, her voice shook, "this one seemed to." Lolly tossed Edward back on the couch. He landed face down with his arms over his head and his dress still over his face, and he stayed that way through dinner. "Why have you got out that old high chair?" shouted Lolly. "Well, don't pay it no mind," said Nellie. "Your father was just gluing on a missing piece. Wasn't you, Lawrence?" "That's right," said Lawrence without looking up from his plate. Of course, after dinner, Edward did not go outside and stand beneath the stars to have a smoke with Lawrence. And Nellie, for the first time since Edward had been with her, did not sing him a lullaby. In fact, Edward was ignored and forgotten about until the next morning, when Lolly picked him up again and pulled his dress down away from his face and stared at him in the eye. "Got the old folks bewitched, don't you?" said Lolly. "I heard the talk in the town, that they've been treating you like a rabbit child." Edward stared back at Lolly. Her lipstick was bright and bloody red. He felt a cold breeze blow through the room. Was a door open somewhere? "Well, you don't fool me," she said. She gave him a shake. "We'll be taking a trip together, you and me." Holding Edward by the ears, Lolly marched into the kitchen and shoved him face down in the garbage can. "Ma," Lolly shouted, "I'm taking the truck. I'm going to head out and do some errands." "Oh," came Nellie's tremulous voice. "That's wonderful, dear. Goodbye, then." "Goodbye," thought Edward as Lolly hauled the garbage can out to the truck. "Goodbye," Nellie called again, louder this time. Edward felt a sharp pain somewhere deep inside his china chest. For the first time, his heart called out to him. It said two words: Nellie, Lawrence. So we end this chapter seeing that Edward is again beginning to feel something. He knows he's being taken away from Nellie and Lawrence, and his heart is starting to react to that. He's building those emotions. So we're going to continue with chapter 11 because chapter 10 was short. Edward ended up at the dump. He lay on top of the orange peels, coffee grounds, rancid bacon, and rubber tires. The first night he was at the top of the garbage heap, and so he was able to look up at the stars and find comfort in their light. In the morning, a short man came climbing up the trash and rubble. He stopped when he was standing on top of the highest pile. He put his hands under his armpits and flapped his elbows. The man crowed loudly. He shouted, "Who am I? I'm Ernest, Ernest, who is king of the world. How can I be king of the world? Because I am the king of garbages, and garbages is what the world is made out of. Ha ha ha! Therefore I'm Ernest, Ernest, who is king of the world." He crowed again. Edward was inclined to agree with Ernest's assessment of the world being made of garbage, especially after his second day at the dump, when a load of trash was deposited directly on top of him. He lay there, buried alive. He could not see the sky. He could not see the stars. He could see nothing. What kept Edward going, what gave him hope, was thinking of how he would find Lolly and exact his revenge. Ooh, revenge is like getting back at someone. He would pick her up by the ears. He would bury her under a mountain of trash. But after almost 40 days and nights had passed, the weight and the smell of the garbage above and below him clouded Edward's thoughts, and soon he gave up thinking about revenge and gave in to despair. It was worse, much worse than being buried at sea. It was worse because Edward was a different rabbit now. He couldn't say how he was different. He just knew that he was. He remembered again Pellegrina's story about the princess who had loved nobody. The witch turned her into a warthog because she loved nobody. He understood that now. he heard Pellegrina say, "You disappoint me." "Why?" he'd asked her. "Why do I disappoint you?" But he knew the answer to that question too. It was because he had not loved Abilene enough, and now she was gone from him, and he would never be able to make it right. And Nellie and Lawrence were gone too. He missed them terribly. He wanted to be with them, and the rabbit wondered if that was love. What do you guys think? He's starting to miss people. Is that love? Day after day passed, and Edward was aware of time passing only because every morning he could hear Ernest performing his dawn ritual, cackling and crowing about being king of the world. And on his 180th day at the dump, 180 days he's been there, salvation arrived for Edward in the most unusual form. The garbage around him shifted, and the rabbit heard the sniffing and panting of a dog. Then came the frenzied sound of digging. The garbage shifted again, and suddenly, miraculously, the beautiful, buttery light of late afternoon shone on Edward's face. We're going to pick up again our next time together, and we'll see what happens now that Edward has been discovered at the dump.